think of being perfect. And then suddenly we remind ourselves that, well, nobody's perfect. Who in the world could have a pure heart? And we know that it has to do somehow with our desires and goals and what we long for. After all, isn't that the property of the heart? I think what Paul is telling Timothy is, have a pure heart. That is, what are your desires, Timothy? What do you really want? And we all know that what we want is what we're going to follow after, and that shapes us in part, doesn't it? In great measure. What we desire shapes how we live and what we do, how we spend our time, how we use our resources. It shapes us. What do we want? And that's what he's asking Timothy. Have a pure heart. If you had to find a singular desire, what would it be, Timothy? And maybe he knows a little bit of the answer, or he hopes for the answer that Timothy might give. And he hopes for the answer. The scriptures sort of beg the question of us, hoping that we'll say, well, of course, I want God. And to want God as a singular desire purifies our hearts, doesn't it? Remember, Jesus was always bringing people to those crossroads. What do you really want? What's your desire? Because that will purify your heart. And there were those who said, well, I want power. And Jesus would say, in a sense, in a story, in a parable, is that really what you want? Or there were those who had difficulty letting go of their wealth and embracing God. And Jesus would say, you can't serve your wealth and God too. Jesus, it seems, throughout his life and ministry, was always prompting people to examine their hearts, to purify their hearts by reaching for a singular goal. What's your desire? You might say, what do you desire most? See, to have a pure heart is to have a focused desire. You might think, well, what about ambition? What about ambition? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because that's something that fits into the desires of the heart, doesn't it? We all have ambitions. I heard a story recently about a young executive who was climbing the ladder in his company. He was doing all the right things to earn attention, and he got it. The president of the company came to see him, and he said, listen, I've had my eye on you. I've noticed you. You work long hours. You're very effective. You are producing. You have this company's best interest in mind. You are perhaps the most ambitious young man I know, and because you are so ambitious, it's guys like you that climb the ladder fast and step into my shoes, and that's exactly why I'm firing you. Even when ambition, we would think, is a good thing, sometimes gets turned around. It's something that characters throughout the scriptures seem to have, but here was the difference. It was given to a singular desire. It was focused toward God. Could anyone say that the Apostle Paul was not an ambitious person? Of course not. He was ambitious. He was ambitious in a way that God directed. He was ambitious for God. Certainly Jesus was ambitious. But it turns the definition upside down, doesn't it? He was ambitious to fulfill God's will. It's always an interesting question to ask about our ambitions, which seem to dovetail with our desires. We want to do this. We want to do that, but why? Why do we want to do it? And Jesus reminded us in the end that all that really matters is that we would love God and we would love one another. That we would serve God and serve one another. You see, if we keep asking that question, why, we come to something of a purified heart, don't we? Purified desire. To have a singular desire. Paul tells Timothy, listen, that's a part of it. To have a pure heart, that is to have a singular desire toward God and God's purpose. But it's also important to have a good conscience. To have a good conscience. You know, that little voice we speak of when we're talking about our inner person. Maybe the whisper of God's Spirit, this is right and that's wrong, or go this way. What is that exactly? Well, we could certainly say it has to do with the arena of our thoughts, doesn't it? A good conscience. Maybe our first take on it is to think about intelligence. After all, everyone else must have greatly intelligent thoughts, but I seem to think about everything here and there, and it's so scattered throughout the day. Why is that fly hanging on my windshield so tenaciously as I go down the road? Peter Feinstein thought about flies on his windshield. Everyone else must have great thoughts. Thoughts are about intelligence, but not necessarily so. I was also reminded of the rancher who was being interviewed as to his great success, and someone said, what's the secret of being a great success as a rancher? He said, let me tell you something. 50% of it is about the weather. He said the other 50% is just stubborn good luck, and all of the rest is brains. We could say that probably about our lives, right? 50% this, 50% luck, chance, whatever, and all the rest is brains. A good conscience is not about our intelligence. It's not about our lofty thoughts, but it is about worthwhile thoughts. You see, what we think about shapes us just like our desires shape us. What we dwell on in our thoughts shapes us. Paul is telling Timothy, listen, purify your heart by reaching for a single goal beyond all of the ambition. Purify your thoughts by having a good conscience. Make your thoughts worthwhile. What we think about can have purpose. What we think about is powerful, not only towards someone else, but to shape us as well. What we dwell upon changes us. And lastly, as if three strands of a powerful rope bound together, he says, have a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith. A sincere faith. Now, he's told Timothy, listen, don't depart from all that I have taught you. But he doesn't tell Timothy the specifics here. He says, let your faith be genuine. Let it be real. Let it be sincere. Isn't it interesting how often we come to those aspects of our faith, the content of our faith, and maybe we ask the question, do I really believe that? Well, don't move too quickly past that, but that's a valuable exercise. You see, it's not significant, that portion of our faith, if it's not sincere and genuine. It might be the most wonderful of doctrines, the most wonderful of concepts, but if it's not genuine and sincere, if we don't order our lives by it, if we wouldn't hang everything on it and say, you know, I really do believe that, it has no power to change us and shape us. But if, in fact, we find ourselves wrestling with our faith and finally saying, this is what I sincerely and genuinely believe, then that has the power to change us and shape us, to direct our lives. And you see how all this fits together. And yet there's more. Now, too, as you strive for a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith, I want you to realize that all of those are going to lead you toward, you probably guessed it, love. This is the end of all things. You see, this is God's training ground for you. As you consider your desires, as you consider your thoughts, as you consider what you truly believe, all of those come together, have their end That's the ultimate goal. And it's as if he's saying, Timothy, don't waste your life. Don't waste your life in all the other pursuits and distractions. Don't waste it. Have a singular desire, a pure heart. Have focus on worthwhile thoughts. That's a good conscience. And have a sincere faith, genuine faith. And it's all aimed toward love. Here's the bottom line for us all. Don't waste your desires. Don't waste your thoughts. Don't waste your beliefs and your faith, lest life and opportunity pass you by. Don't waste them. Rather, take aim. Take aim toward love with a pure heart